everybody, this is Sarah at the Catholic Homemaker. Today I'm going to be talking about how to increase your chances of getting pregnant. This is a collab video with Ali-Marie Ingram from My Catholic Perspective. I first want to say that the tips I'm going to give, they won't guarantee that you're going to get pregnant, but they will certainly increase your chances. And I want to be sensitive to anybody who is struggling with infertility. I'm really sorry if you are struggling with that. I know that is something really painful to go through. And personally, when I first got married, my husband and I weren't doing anything to prevent pregnancy, and I wasn't able to get pregnant until about 10 months into our marriage. And during that time, was a little painful for me because I was preparing myself for the possibility of never having children, but thankfully I was able to conceive and I am able to have children, so I'm very grateful for that, and I hope that these tips will help you as well. Ali-Marie is sharing tips from people on their #1 recommendation of how to get pregnant. And the one I shared is eating a traditional nutrient-dense diet, and one that's with natural, healthy fats from pasture-raised animals, especially from tallow, lard, butter, and ghee. And then coconut oil and sustainable palm oil are also very healthy fats to eat. But it's also avoiding industrialized seed oils or vegetable oils, and industrialized food in general is very important. So it's not just the kind of food that you should be eating, but also what you shouldn't be eating. And vegetable oils, I'm talking about canola, soybean, cottonseed, corn, sunflower, and safflower oils. These were all industrially processed. There's no way for you to make it in your home kitchen without heavy machinery. They're just completely unnatural and rancid. I have a whole video on why you should avoid vegetable oils, so I'll link to that. Now, Native Americans would actually send women into the woods to eat bear fat if they weren't able to conceive. So just something to keep in mind. Our ancestors ate this way, completely natural. They avoid refined and denatured foods. Now, I'm using the terms refined and denatured. These come from Sally Fallon Morell, and she said it's okay to process your food. And what she means by that is sometimes foods like grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, they actually need to be processed. And a number of plant foods do need to be processed because they have anti-nutrients in them. And anti-nutrients can prevent us from absorbing the nutrients that we need. So by processing the foods, by specifically grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, if we soak them, and sometimes they need an acidic medium to be soaked in, they can neutralize those anti-nutrients, and we're able to absorb the nutrients in the plants better. So that is what Native Americans and other people living off the land did. They did process their food in this way, but it helped them to absorb the nutrients better. But they did also avoid refined and denatured foods, and that's mostly what is in our standard American diet these days. There's nothing nourishing about it anymore. And that even includes things like milk. Even if you're buying organic milk, it's still processed because it's been homogenized and pasteurized. And Native people did not have pasteurized or homogenized milk. If they were raising animals at all, they would be, a good example is the Maasai from Africa. They would, a bulk of their diet was raw cow's milk, and they were very, very healthy people. And that is just something to keep in mind, that just try to eat your food as natural as possible, but if it needs to be processed in the ways that I mentioned, then that's okay. Just look to what our ancestors did. I also want to say that infertility has been around since the beginning of time. We see it in the Bible as well. So it has always existed, but it has gotten worse in our modern time. So it's better if we try to eat and live more like our ancestors did. And obviously we can't go completely back to living the way they did, but we can try to mimic it in certain ways. Before I move on to the next tip, I also want to mention some special diets. The GAPS diet and Paleo diet, I used them several years ago and they helped me to overcome a number of health issues, especially the GAPS diet. It was very healing for me. And some people even do AIP or autoimmune paleo, and that's somewhat similar to the GAPS diet. One other special diet is the carnivore diet, and it may seem really extreme, but there's somebody I follow called Sally Godwin. She has a YouTube channel and her Instagram is Real Girls Eat Fat, and she talks about her experience with the carnivore diet, and she has even talked about how it has improved her fertility as well. So there's a lot of stories out there of people who have used the carnivore diet and it's completely improved their health. So look that up and look her up. She's a really great resource. She's currently nursing her third child, and she talks about how she's actually producing more milk than when she was eating a lot more carbohydrates. And the funny thing about that is a lot of people who recommend certain foods for producing more milk, they recommend a lot of carbohydrates, but she has actually reduced her carbohydrates and has produced more. So it's just very interesting. The second tip I have is natural healing modalities like acupuncture, homeopathy, and another one is called KST, or the Koren specific technique. And that was created by Dr. Ted Koren, who's a chiropractor. It is, I'm actually not quite sure how to explain it, but it's, I'll make sure to link it below so you guys can look it up. But I've heard a couple of his lectures, and he has mentioned a number of testimonials from healing his own patients. And so I think it's something to consider if you're struggling with infertility. And all these healing modalities, they work on your whole body and they help to balance your hormones. Instead of simply just taking a drug to target a couple symptoms, you're working to see what's going on in your entire body. And that really helps in the long run. Personally, I saw an acupuncturist, and within 2 months of seeing her, I was able to get pregnant with my oldest daughter. And I remember immediately upon getting treatment with her and getting the herbs afterwards, I felt like my hormones were finally balancing. So it's something that I really needed. But I also want to note that it's important to see somebody who is really good at what they do, because I saw another acupuncturist for a whole year many years ago, and I didn't feel any difference in my health in going to her. So it's just really important to see somebody who is really good at what they do, and it's important to be able to see results in yourself. The number 3 tip I have is NFP, or natural family planning. And there's a number of different methods now, and I'm familiar with 2 that we've used, and it's the Creighton model and the Marquette method. And now we switched over to the Marquette method, and I like it so much more than the Creighton model because of its objectivity. It measures your estrogen and LH hormones, and it tells you on the monitor, it has 3 readings. It has low, high, and peak. And so if you're trying to conceive, then the high days and peak days are good for you, but the low days are what you need to stick to when you are trying to avoid pregnancy. There's more rules to that than that, so don't just follow those instructions like I said. You actually need to follow an instructor because it's more complicated than that. But it's, in my mind, it's much more simple than the other methods, and a lot of people say the same thing. And let me tell you just how effective the Marquette method is, especially if you're trying to conceive, because my husband and I were trying to avoid at the time, and we were switching from Creighton model to Marquette because the Creighton model just wasn't a good fit for us personally, because I produce way too much cervical mucus. So it was really hard to tell if I was fertile or infertile because I was always producing mucus. And there's different ways of, working with that. But for me, it was just very hard to tell. So we wanted to switch to a different method. And in that process, we had just learned from an instructor. And the previous week, I had seen what's called fertile type mucus, and it's like clear, stretchy, and lubricative. And that I was seeing all of that for like almost an entire week. And I was like, okay, I'm definitely fertile this time. And then I started to use the monitor, and it was saying hi. I was like, okay. And then I was still relying on the Creighton model, even though I was using the new method of Marquette. And I was starting to get completely dry days with Creighton. And I was like not completely confident to just trust the Marquette method. And I had 3 days in a row of completely dry, no mucus at all. And so I thought, okay, I must be infertile. But then the monitor was saying that it was high. You have to avoid on a high day. And I was like, well, the monitor has to be wrong, because there's no way that I am still fertile if I am dry, and I had a whole week of fertile type mucus. But then a few days later, the monitor read peak, and I was like, oh no. And we ended up getting pregnant with my youngest daughter at that time. And so anyway, sharing that story with you was just to encourage you how effective the Marquette method actually is, and to trust the monitor, trust what it says, because it probably is very accurate. So if you're having a hard time conceiving, consider that method. And we have used our HSA to pay for everything associated with it, including instructions. So that was really nice, because one of the things that deterred me from it for a while was the cost of it. And well, you just have to buy the monitor one time, so that's a one-time cost, but then the sticks can be pretty expensive. So it's nice that our HSA actually covers that. Moving on to tip number 4, getting enough sunshine every day, spending time outdoors, and getting vitamin D. It's really important. And try to avoid sunscreen as well. There's a great Wise Traditions podcast episode where the host talks with an expert who doesn't recommend any sort of sunscreen, and she goes through the reasons of that. Not just environmental, but also for our health. So it's very interesting. And she talks about what our ancestors would have done instead of sunscreen. So it's just something to consider. Number 5 is getting enough exercise. It obviously helps with losing and maintaining your weight, and it helps with your overall health and balancing your hormones. Number 6 is getting enough sleep. And using blackout curtains are important because you want to avoid those unnatural lights from street lights, or if you live in the city, from all the lights around you, and avoiding bright screens and lights before bedtime, and having an earlier bedtime and also waking up with the sunrise. All these things can help to reset your circadian rhythm and just make you overall healthier. Number 7, protecting yourself from EMFs or electromagnetic frequencies. Don't keep your phone on your body. Put it on airplane mode whenever you can, and try to use wired connections whenever possible. And if you have Wi-Fi, turn it off at night. All these things can help to reduce the EMF load on your body, and they're all around us, so it's hard to completely avoid unless you live in the middle of nowhere, I suppose. But all these things can help, and it's been shown that EMFs can affect your fertility, so that's important to avoid if you can. Number 8 is avoiding toxins in your environment. So things like synthetic perfumes, your personal care products from your makeup, hair care and skincare, switching over to safer ingredients or products, and also your cleaning products. For cleaning products, I would recommend 7th Generation or Branch Basics. They're both really effective and safe cleaners to use, and I use both of those. For skincare, hair care, and makeup, I would recommend going to the EWG Skin Deep database, and that's ewg.org/skindeep. And you can look up products you are using to see if they're safe, or you can simply look up ingredients if your products aren't listed, or you can just look up, say you're looking for an eyeshadow, you could even just look up eyeshadow on there and see what pops up. And you want to look for ratings between 0 to 2. Those are the safest. And same with the ingredients. So try to stay in that range if you can. I think up to 3 is okay, but 0 to 2 is the safest. There's usually no safety concerns with those ratings. So I can link to that below. And another ingredient you definitely always want to avoid is fragrance. And this is in so many personal care products and cleaning products. So if you take fragrance out, it'll really clean things up. But fragrance can contain anywhere from like hundreds to thousands of ingredients. And it's important to clean up these products in your life because a lot of these have what's called endocrine disruptors, and it can negatively mess with your hormones. So if you can try to clean that up, that may help with your fertility. If you are going through infertility, I'm really sorry that you're going through that, and I will pray for you. And I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell for all notifications. And until next time, bye.